Hey gang, welcome back to JODADDY's Garage. Today's video is part 11 in the 69 Mustang Cobra Jet rebuild series. Now in the previous video I showed you some of the fitment issues with the new panels, with the cowl, firewall, those sort of things, and I also cut open the roof on the original car and saved the front and rear header panels. Now I'm going to continue on test fitting other pieces and parts. I want to get to the point where I can start welding some things together. So let me show you some of those details that need to be addressed prior to doing any of that stuff. This is a 69 Mach 1 14-inch Cobra Jet. Here we have the fitment issue with the cowl fitting the firewall and the air box. The lower section of this torque box fits. Well, what I want to do next is weld together the shock tower, the aprons, have all that in place. Here we go. So as I said, you've seen all this stuff mocked up together. I'm going to go over more of those details as I move forward, but I want to show you some things as to what I'm talking about again. Here we have the fitment issue with the cowl fitting the firewall and the air box. So there's a conflict here. There's also a conflict up here where this upper portion is actually hitting the inside of the windshield frame. I think there's going to have to be some cutting to make this work. Let me get the export brace out of the way. Now, take off the upper half of the cowl. And I know I've shown this before, but I want to keep everybody on the same page. One of the conflicts is this right here. This little flange is hitting the air box. Up here, I can move this in slightly. There will be adjustments made to make sure everything's right. So I've got a little bit of an overlap here on this flange. So this can't sit down in the way it's supposed to. And then as I said before, underneath here, it's hitting, if you can see that, it's hitting on this structure. So I think this is gonna have to be reshaped slightly. But what I wanna do is start by trimming down this section right here. Make sure that is out of the way. I'm going to take a little right here. I could probably do that two different ways. I could probably trim that corner, or I could take some out of this, but I want to keep the most of this flange. On the other side, it's not nearly as bad at all. This sits down pretty well against the air box, but you can see the transition. It's nice on the firewall, and then when it gets to the side panel, the kick panel, hopefully you can see this, it wants to kind of kick up a little bit. And I don't see that as being a huge concern, but it's going to have to be addressed to make sure that sits down in there. This is that corner on the opposite side, so it's already cut correctly. And then a little bit up here as well. I'm going to trim this out and make room for that to drop in. I'm kind of confused, I guess, as to why this corner, it looks like it's got the right shape to it, but there's no reason that it should be hitting so hard on the inside of the cowl. So I may just do a little bit of hammer and dolly work to try to get that to drop down in place. Much better. Now what still concerns me here is this transition. You know, this curve on the firewall is not correct with this curve. And I'm not sure why that is. I can look at the original firewall and I mean, even though it's kind of beat up, I can see that that curve is a little more consistent. So again, I'm going to be using the bulk of this anyway, but I'm trying to make sure everything fits as it should. But that's just one part that's throwing me off, why this is shaped like that. It would definitely appear that this needs to drop some more. The thing is, the way this is put together at this point, all of this is already in a fixed location. There's no changing without cutting everything apart. There's no changing this dimension. So I could trim the upper half of that just a little on that flange to try to get it to drop in a little more. And that may be what I have to do. Let me take this air box back out. Yeah. So it's hitting on the top of this, which is how it should be hitting. But it also can't come down anymore. So, let me just see if I can adjust that a little. That helped. It's not hitting that at this point. There's clearance there. So this is the contact point on this corner. Let's go look at that original one again, just to get an idea. Yeah, that's a weird transition. But it looks correct. You know, this has this subtle dip right there. Okay. With those adjustments, that is much, much better than what we started with. Now it's possible this could clamp in a little better here. You can see the transition changes. So I may have to be careful with that, because by pushing this back, it's consuming metal. It's shortening the length here. So it's more critical to keep these in place than it is to have this making that contact. You can see what I'm talking about right there. It pulls that away. If I have to, I'll adjust this flange after things are in place. So let's just see how this looks with the cowl on, the upper cowl on top. At this point, just get some clamps on it. Now there's still a discrepancy with these holes, but I'm not going to hold it to the hole being dead on accurate. I'd rather trust overall fitment than to trust those holes over anything else. That's looking pretty good. Now the firewall is going to have to come out just a little more. Come forward. I can push that out with my hands. I can't show you, but I can push it forward with my hand. But that is much, much better. And again, there'll be more adjusting and massaging, but all this now is really close to where it needs to be. Yeah, I don't want to force that. I noted that upper section of the firewall, that could be a little bit different than what the original is like, so I don't want to get too forceful with that. Again, that's right on. Looking good. Yeah, that is looking much, much better. Okay, now that I have all of that kind of where I want it, I want to move on, and again, I talk about test fitting everything. So in that box there, we have the torque box. So there's a part number. This is says CJ Classics. This is typically because of this coating, a Dynacorn part, but they labeled it as CJ Classic. Before I get to that, let me just show you something else. I've already marked these locations here. So when it comes to getting all this prepped out, I'm going to make a series of holes on both sides of the floor support, probably weld some on the bottom as well. And one thing that I want to point out, there's been some viewer concern about the distance from the floor support to this front section of the frame rail. And my opinion is this floor support is set back too far. So this gap is a little bit off. It's not going to hurt anything overall. But the reason I say it's off is, if you can see my jig, I made those posts in a proper location. And both of those posts are back maybe half an inch. So it's leaning it to the rear the post itself. I'm not going to cut all that loose. I'm not going to take that floor support out just to remedy that. There's no benefit to it. Just cutting and piecing it back together. We're going to leave it together as it is. So, whoops, bumped my GoPro up there. You know, this gap over here, that would be a concern normally, but we have the torque box. So the way this is intended, this is to fit inside. So I get it in the right position. Inside of that opening, and I take this mallet and encourage it a little bit. At this point, that's actually in line with the bottom of that floor support. It's lining up very nice on the inside of the rocker panel. A little bit of contact here, but that's okay. And up here, this is in plane with these holes. I can see I'm in plane with the floor pan. So this overall is fitting decent at this point. I will point out there's a transition here because the floor has a depression in the middle. So if I come in here and show you, or when I say depression, it's a transition. So this is a little bit different shape, and they purposefully make this a joggle to compensate. Now I may do a little massaging, try to get this up tight against the bottom of the floor pan, of course, and it will get welded to the floor pan in these various locations to hold it all up in there nicely. Now let's see how the lower section of this torque box fits. And again, this is one of those you gotta hold everything just right to get it to drop in right. Okay. All right, let me take this loose. And this one. There you go. Give it a little bit of room. Let me see what else I can do here. That's not bad. Now this can be massaged up into place. Go. Yeah, that's going to work. That is going to work. You know, it's funny, this little corner, it may stick out a little right there, but I'm pretty sure it does that right there on the original. Good. Now the other thing left in this box is this little transition piece, and that ends up basically right there. So I'm happy that fits for the most part. Yeah, it's even nicely fitting the bottom of the floor support. So again, a little more tuning to get all that exactly where it needs to be, but that looks good. So let's look at the passenger side. Now surprisingly, this doesn't have, I don't see a label on it like on the other side. So again, flange faces out. May just have a little bit of a conflict with this corner, but that's pretty minor. I can trim that if need be. Oh, there we go. Never mind. That fits really nice. And then this has a sticker, but it doesn't say anything. No part number. Well, there's an N number. So, you know, this may or may not be an actual Dynacorn or CJ Classics. That could be a whole different company. So let's see if I can get this to drop in. Oh, beauty. Now this one, this is lining up much better with the overlap on that face. Yeah, I'll have to push that up, of course. I don't have any more clamps over here, I don't think. Oh, I got one. Again, that corner sticks out just a little bit. Well, it does stick out if you line that up just a little. And then it actually hangs below the rocker panel on this one slightly. So really, that's very, very close. Very, very close. Now, okay, this says CJ Classic on it, 3654 WT. Nice. Okay. I'm happy with how all of that is fitting in this mock-up. So here's where I'm at. With all that in place and all that kind of feeling like it's right, the only other things I want to do, well, what I want to do next is weld together the shock tower, the aprons, have all that in place. And, you know, I'm very happy or comfortable with how my jig is doing what it's supposed to do. So I know that the frame rails are in the proper location. You know, whenever I take measurements, one of the measurements I did was from the transmission cross member, the face of it, basically to the center line of this mount point up here for the shock tower, or the, you know, the center section of the shock tower down there. So I didn't take the brackets off of the floor support, I mean the frame rail. So those are not changed. And when I've done those measurements from the front of the cross member to the front of the cross member on this car, they come out the same. So I'm happy with how everything is there. However, what I want to do, because I have to clamp all that together, right? So I have a clamp holding that flange, so that puts it against the frame rail and limits its movement. It can't really go anywhere. Same way with that lower clamp, it's squeezing together the plates around that center section. But what I want to make sure that I don't do is over compress that. Now I can't really change anything. I'm not going to make it so nothing fits in there, but I do need to make sure that the lower control arm fits in there. It may not make much of a difference, but I'm going to put that lower control arm in place and make sure that, you know, it lines up. So I'll show you what we have. This is the Chris Alston suspension setup from, I guess it's Total Control Products. I believe it says Chris Alston on the original box. Let me go check that quick, just to make sure I'm not telling you something incorrect. Yeah, it says it right there. Chris Alston right on the box. So I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. Anyway, so this is the upper control arm. I'll go ahead and open it just to show you what it looks like. You can see it pretty well, I think. And let me just get rid of the plastic. Now this looks like a pretty cool setup. I'm not sure, I guess you could put it on either way. If you wanted it a little bit higher or lower, you've got adjustments here on both sides, so you can make it pivot it back and forth. Let's see, what is that? Camber, caster, yeah, whatever. So let's just look at that. Yeah, that's gonna look really good on there. I'm assuming that's the way it goes, because you wouldn't want it up here. That would put it way up high. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then in the other bags, I should say, I didn't bring them all out, just what was needed at this point. Let's see if I can open this. I want to be sure you want to get in this bag. Make you earn it. So that's a nice piece. Wow. Heavy duty. Let's look here. We got these bolts. Nice fit. So what I should be able to do, I know I can't get my head down low enough to show you. Let's see if I can reset the camera. I'm going to take this clamp out. All I want to verify is this will fit. And that's gonna be a snug fit. And that's what I was concerned about. I wanted to make sure these were not too tight, that this would not fit in there. And I'm not gonna get aggressive with it just yet. Oh, that's even got that pivots. Oh, that is nice. Okay. I know it'll fit in there, but I'll make some adjustments to make it get in there, fit in there properly. I don't want to force anything right at this very moment, so I need to spread this apart a little bit, and that could be as simple as a block of wood, put a 2x4 on one side, and a screwdriver or something on the other, and press it apart. Just give it a little bit of room. The whole thing pivots. That is awesome. Oh man, that is awesome. Makes it hard to push in, but that is pretty awesome. And you want this to be a snug fit anyway. Yeah. Okay, that's gonna go in. A little crook. Almost there. there it goes. I knew it would fit. All right, good. Oh, that looks nice. That looks nice. I'm not sure that bolt, I don't know if that's the right bolt. It's not long enough for this configuration. I just grabbed a bolt out of the bag. I don't know if that's the right bolt or not, but, oh, that looks nice. So like I was saying, this has a pivot on it, like a ball. That is awesome. Okay, I know that'll fit. So here's where we're at. I have the shock towers installed where I want them, ready to be welded. I've done a bunch of cross measuring to make sure they're in the right location, and I also have the export brace bolted in between them. I've cross measured from the corner of that rear apron down to the frame rail on the inside here, and also the same thing at that angle. Measurement is exactly the same. I've also measured, and not that it matters at this point, but between the aprons, and made sure that measurement was consistent with what I had before. It's very close, but again, these are not ready to be welded to the firewall yet. So what I have done is I've knocked down those tabs, put everything in place. I did put a bolt through the lower control arm, and I put a nut on and tightened those down so everything is compressed. So when I weld that, there's nothing should change at this point. So it is compressed in. The fitment, I can't change anything at this point, let's say, because the flanges on the inside, they're down against the face. The outer flanges on the front and rear are compressed, and also the inside here I have clamps holding it against the frame rail. And with that bolt and everything else in place, there's really nowhere else for these to go. Even without the export brace in place, these, based on the shapes of the frame rail and the flanges, there's nowhere for it to go. So I'm getting ready to weld all of those prepped holes all the way around, and I'm going to be using the Arccaptain MiG 200. So I'm going to continue to use this welder. I have swapped out to 30 thousandths wire. I need to change that here when the settings, this is the wire. So you click on that, it steps it up to the next size, which is 30 thousandths. And mode, back to stick, TIG, and MIG with flux core, and MIG with gas. And there's my mix, so that's all set and ready to go. And I don't have it on synchronous at this point. If I did, it would turn off all those parameters, and I believe it changes, that's your meters per minute on the wire feed. So for now, I'm going to leave it on synchronous and see how it does welding this stuff together. Let's get welding. Very good. Very good. Okay, that's the gist of it right now. Really good welds. Penetration, very happy with all of that. Now some of this I'm going to have to crawl underneath to weld, so I'm not going to continue just to film welding, but there I did that edge on both sides, and very happy with that. Now, of course, I will be moving on, and that inside flange there, I have on the other side a clamp holding the apron against the frame rail. I may swap back over to the 25 thousandths wire for that. So I'm going to finish up welding all of this in, and any other things I need to, any other welds I need to fill in, like down there's still another one I got to do. And I think there's a couple up underneath there that I can't see from up high. So, yep, I'm liking this machine. Well, I'm officially out of welding gas now. So, off to get a refill. Oh boy. Okay, here's where we're at. Both shock towers are fully welded to the frame rails. They are not going anywhere anymore. The rear aprons are also welded to the frame rails on both sides. And now I'm at a point where I can take all of this back off, because I still have to do prep work for the holes for the floor supports that are the welds will go through into the frame rails, and I have to modify the firewall. You know, we're using as much as we can of the original firewall, and so I have to take all that back apart and cut off the lower section and try to merge the two back together. Hopefully that all goes well. At this point, I have some good references, because with the cowl sitting the way it is right now, I know that it is at a good height, so I can adjust, you know, the new or the old section of firewall to fit back up in there. And if I need to make some adjustments, I can still do that. So at this point, basically, all this has to come back off. I want to make sure that the lower control arms will come out of the channels that they're in. So let me make sure. Like I said, these bolts are way too short. I'm not sure why they made them that short, especially if there's going to be a secondary piece, because we all know normally this would have a washer here that you could cam to make adjustments on your lower control arm, and I'm assuming it should still have that. So if that's the case, these bolts are way too short, but they worked for what I was doing. So might have to wiggle it a little bit. Yeah, this one, hang on just a hair. Let me check the other one. Yep, it comes out. Good. There it comes. That's good though. Nothing wrong with having a snug fit. You still need to trim that corner just a little bit. Very good. Now I can focus on that firewall. As I demonstrated, I used the Arccaptain welder to weld on the shock towers and the rear apron areas. I also showed you some of the things I had to do to modify the cowl or adjust things to try to make things fit properly. And you know, that's all part of the process. So I hope you can find some good information in this. As I said, the next video I will be working on the firewall because we're going to use the upper half of the original firewall. Hopefully that addresses some of that curve issue that we have with the cowl and where those flanges mate, but we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. As it is, once again, thank you for watching.